And we are going to start with Rasheer Fleming from St. Joe's. Fleming is a 6'9", 240-pound wing per St. Joe's website. He has a rumored 7'4" wingspan, which is very enticing. And he is a junior who is going to be 20.9 years old on draft night. So still pretty young for his age. So, this is a guy who I think has been like a kind of a hot sleeper name the last couple of years, a guy to monitor just because you look at his physical tools and you look how strong he is and his length, his athleticism. And, it's a guy who is really, really, truly intriguing, but never really put it together the way that I think he has started to put it together this year. So he is averaging 14.7 points per game, 8.8 rebounds per game, 1.3 assists to 1.6 turnovers, 1.5 blocks, 1.4 steals on 55, 42.6, 70 shooting split, 65 true shooting, 8.7 BPM. So a very, very intriguing forward is Rasheer Fleming.
Yeah, Corey. Interesting is the right word. And I think, as we get into his breakdown, I think, I do want to give, I think it was Tyler Metcalf, who wrote a beautiful piece about Fleming. Correct me if I'm wrong, Corey. I'm pretty sure it was. But he did a beautiful article on him at NoCeilingsNBA.com. And I really liked how at the start of his piece, he focused in on the fact that, and like you just said, Corey, the flashes have always been there, right? Like the physique, the athleticism, the length, all that stuff has been there. But this year has been different because, as you mentioned, things are starting to come together more a little bit this year. And we're seeing, the key word is consistency. We are seeing a more consistent version and a more consistent, well, not just version, but like we're more consistently seeing him put all these things together game to game. So I think with Fleming, I'm really excited to hear, because I know, Corey, you're a big fan of his, and I like him too. But I'm excited to get into the breakdown because he's a guy who has a lot of gifts, has a lot of talents, but this year has been very different because he's really starting to put things together. And even like efficiency wise, things have been a lot better this year. So yeah, a very exciting forward for us to talk about today.
Yeah, no doubt. And Rucker got to see him at Formula Zero in the offseason at Dame Lillard and Phil Beckner's camp. I saw him against Texas with our very own Nathan Grubel at the Barclays Center earlier this year. And to me, seeing him up close definitely set him up in a different light, and seeing like, you could tell he's a beast on film, but like seeing him up close next to some of these other guys, you're like, oh, this dude's different. Like he is way different as far as, he just has a ready-made NBA body and in the best ways, and like he moves like it too. So let's kind of get into the scout with Fleming, and you know how we do it here. We like to start with shooting on the show. So Fleming is finally kind of putting it together as a shooter. He's shooting 42.6% from three on 4 3-point attempts a game, 7.7 3-point attempts per 100 possessions, 42.6 on catch and shoot threes, 50% unguarded, 38% on unguarded catch and shoot threes. So, I mean, I guess we will also say he's shooting right around 70% on free throws, a little bit under, if we're being honest. So where are you at with Rasheer Fleming as a shooter? Do you think that this is kind of a hot shooting year? Or do you think that this feels more real and he's made kind of legit improvements?
I think for me, Corey, we have to highlight the fact that he's improved year over year. We like the progression. We like the trajectory that his shooting is going right now. Just to kind of read off some stats here, his freshman season for St. Joe's, he was 29.7% on 2.4 attempts per game from three. Last year as a sophomore, 32.4% on 3 attempts. So volume went up, efficiency went up. And then this year, right, 42.6% on 4 attempts. And so for me, it's, hey, the shooting is not only are we getting an uptick in volume every single season, but the efficiency keeps going up leaps and bounds right now. From year 1 to year 2, went up 3%. From year 2 to year 3, we're at like an 8% jump. But also want to know, Corey, and this is something that we care about a lot: the free throw shooting too, right? Obviously, actually, no, well, his second year was not so good. He was so first year 69%, then 61%, and then this year right under 70%.
Yeah.
But what's important for me is I think his overall game, and we talked about it earlier. There is a more consistent vibe with his game overall, and I think the shooting is where it's kind of the most glaring, right? For him to be at 42.6% on the highest volume of his career, and the fact that both the volume percentages keep going up every single season, that's a really, really great sign. And at the same time, when we're talking about like projecting the future, I don't think it's gonna be linear like that. And next year he'll be at 6 attempts at 49%. That's just not how things work. However, I think if we have to do an evaluation and come to a decision on where we think his shooting is going, I think we have to say it's moving in the right direction.
Yeah. No, for sure. Um, is he going to be a 42% 3-point shooter? Who knows? I mean, I would probably say he's going to hover somewhere in like the 35 to 39 range, especially early on in his career. He might even be a guy who's more of that 32, 33% coming in early, just, adjusting to the distance of the line and the closeouts and, the quickness that you have to process to, make those shots. But I think the shot, like Stephen W. in the chat says, the stroke is fluid and natural. And I think it is too. I think he can get a little knock need. And I think he got a solid base. Like it's not like super wide or perfectly, balanced, like you would be if you were in like a fighting stance. It's a little upright, but it makes him already like he's already tall, and it makes him kind of taller. And he has like that high release, and he actually jumps on his threes. So like he creates a really difficult shot to like clean contest. And I like that he's comfortable shooting with a hand in his face. Guys will kind of drift off him and let him shoot, and he's willing to shoot. And I also kind of like that if he misses some shots, he'll keep shooting,
Mhm.
which I think is a really good sign. But all the numbers are definitely pointing in a strong direction, and I don't think this is like a Davion Mitchell situation where he had this massive jump. Like you said, he's trending up in the right direction, and like Davion was hitting like a ton of like tough contested off the dribble shots, step backs, right? And then he's also smaller as is, so like when as you move up, like he's going to be a top tier like physical specimen even in the NBA. So
Yeah.
I kind of think that the shooting is believable. And like most young like players struggle to shoot with consistency early on. I mean, like what's Grady Dick shooting right now, right? Like that's his main strength. And like so the shooting is, I think, not going to be like there completely right away, but like I think he's going to develop into being like a guy that you definitely like close out hard on going forward. But yeah, like he's got good follow through.
Yeah.
It's not like he doesn't shoot like a super high arcing ball. I don't think he like has like a like super solid touch as
Mhm.
far like it's not like super soft. But yeah, I think that like ultimately like it's something I definitely believe is going to be a part of his game. Like sure.
Yeah. Corey, I think there are two things for me. I think first off, I'm worried less about the jump to the next level. Not that I disagree with you. I do think there. I don't think he's going to walk in and be a 43% 3-point shooter from year one. But I do feel like he's going to have less to adjust to, just because number one, the frame is already there, and number two, there isn't a very um, he doesn't have the most diverse game offensively. I think the role that he'll be asked to do in the NBA will be not so complicated. You're not going to be putting the ball in his hands and asking him to make decisions or do any dribbling. Honestly, a lot of it he's barely going to dribble. I think. So I feel like coming in, I think he could just kind of hone in on his shooting and just work on it a ton coming in. And so I don't know. A part of me feels like I think he might transition better than we think. But who knows? I could be wrong. Um, but yeah, I just felt like overall, like with how simple his game is, I wasn't crazy worried about like the transition for him. And if anything, I thought maybe that could be an advantage for him too. Just like he can just focus on, the simple things that he's going to be doing. And so, yeah, I think he's going to be okay. And overall, as you said, as you mentioned, the shot looks good. And there was another point I was going to make about his motion, but I can't remember. This
Well,
is old age
I
is
think
going to kill me.
the important point they're making is like he
Yeah,
is going to have like a ready-made, simple, simplistic role coming in, which I think we can say about Carter Bryant too.
yeah.
Right, he is like Mr. Ray says, he's going to be a play finisher at the next level, right? So I think that what you don't see from him is a ton of like off the bounce flashes. He's taken 3 shots off the bounce this year,
Hmm.
and he has missed all of them. 2 of them have been at the end of a shot clock. One of them was kind of like a self-created look where he kind of like got into mid post and took like a little fade away, and it looked smooth, but like it
Yeah.
was literally the only shot that he took off the bounce. Um, that wasn't an end of shot clock shot, and even then, few and far between. So like the self creation stuff is as like a shooter is not there, right? Like, um, which I think is like a good opportunity to kind of get into what he ultimately looks like as a self creator or
Mhm.
as a creator in general. Um, because while the off the bounce shooting isn't there, and like if you view him as like a guy who is more of like a swing wing, like you want him to be able to do a little bit of that, right? Even if it's simple, like off of like a pump fake, 2 dribble kind of pull up in the mid range when he can't get all the way to the rim. Um, but I do think he's had some flashes as a driver.
Yeah.
He had like a
Yes.
couple of really nice flashes when I saw him in person. Um, one that ended up with a shot, another that ended up with a pass. But like it's still mostly kind of like line drivey. Sometimes it could be like a little clunky. Like he'll like a defender will beat him to the spot and he'll have to like turn his back and kind of like use his footwork and his strength, which he can do. I think his footwork is pretty good, even though it's not like he doesn't have like super light feet. I'm not saying they're heavy either. But it's he's no Derek Queen when he's kind of using those spin moves. Um, so sometimes it feels a little rushed, but like I think there are some flashes of him at least like using the ability to like attack and get towards the rim, even if like there's not too much going on in that like mid range area.
Corey, I think a point that you made about him being clunky at times, I think is a really important one because something I wrote in my notes is that's actually something I feel about his game overall. There are times that he can be clunky on both ends of the floor, but I didn't put that in my notes as like a slight against him, more of just like I think that's just where he's at right now in terms of his development. I feel like he still needs more refinement. Like this is 3rd season at St. Joe's, but that doesn't mean that he's finished. He's a finished product is my ultimate point. And I think, that was also the point I was trying to make in terms of his shooting, where I was actually surprised that he wasn't more clunky as a shooter because of how long armed he is.
Mm.
And we've seen in the past where guys with like long arms, they can be a little clunky and inconsistent with their mechanics. And I actually wanted to give him credit because I felt like for a guy with with the crazy wingspan that he has, I felt like his mechanics were pretty tight and pretty repeatable for a guy his size. And so I did want to give him credit for that. But offensively, I agree. Like, but at the same time, Corey, I, for me, and Metcalf wrote this in his piece as well. Like, it doesn't bother me too much because, like we saw in the comments, like if he's going to be a play finisher to start, then we're okay with that, right? Keep it simple, play your role, we're okay. But over the course of his career, will he be able to develop more and become a guy who can do more with the ball in his hands? We shall see. We don't know the answer to that. But to your point, Corey, he has had some really strong drives and he's shown some more ability than I think people expect from him. But at the same time, like if you're watching Fleming and hoping like he's going to be Paul George, Luka Doncic, whatever, like it's just not his game and it's not his profile either. And so if we're looking at him to be more of like a play finishing wing four ish type of guy, then I think he's, already got a lot of the tools that you're looking for. But now it's just a matter of waiting to see if he can continue to develop more and add more layers to his game.
Yeah, and I think that is going to be the thing that takes a ton of time if he ever gets
Right.
there. Like that's going to be 4 or 5 years down the line. Like luckily, I think he has tools that'll be able to potentially get him on the floor early. Now, there are some things that I can be like, okay, maybe you can hesitate to say it for sure because I do think some of the processing stuff like has been a lot better. And we can talk about like the playmaking when we get to it. But even like it shows in his self creation when he is like dribbling towards the rim. Like sometimes he won't read the help necessarily, and he'll even like dribble into it. And he'll kind of like turn the ball over just because he's dribbling into traffic, or it'll result in like a harder shot than he needs to when he gets towards the rim, because he's beating that first line but not necessarily seeing the second line. So I think that stuff, as we're saying, might look clunky early, but ultimately the fact that he can knock down threes, he is knocked down 43 threes so far this season. We're in mid-February. Combined with his ability to finish at the rim, where he has 34 dunks, and he's I think a pretty awesome finisher overall. And honestly, sometimes even a guy who I want to see used more as like a finisher with a head of steam than like sometimes it feels like he's just kind of like standing in the corner as a spacer. And like I want to see him used as like a pick and roll guy. Now the problem with that is that like Eric Reynolds ain't passing the rock. Like he's got the ball, like you can bet your bottom dollar that thing's going up. He's gonna let it fly. So if like if X Brown isn't the one who is kind of organizing things, like Derek Simpson's certainly not really much of a playmaker either. The whole offense feels kind of clunky, but like I think he sets really good screens. He's like quick off the ground. He covers a lot of ground. He's like a good jumper. So like I almost like think that some of the small ball 5 stuff is really fun with him too. But really efficient cutter, 94th percentile. But I like the combo that he has, like perimeter and rim gravity at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree with all that, Corey. And I think, okay. So just going back to my original point that I made before when we were getting started with the pod, the reason why like I was thinking of like caviar and truffle oil and things like that is because like when I look at Fleming's game and Carter Bryant, which we'll get into later, these guys are like accentuators or level raisers is kind of what I was thinking as I was doing my breakdown for both. And it's like I'm not drafting Rasheer Fleming to come in and be a number 1, number 2 option on my team.
Right.
I'm grabbing Rasheer Fleming to come in, and we'll talk about the defense later, but I want him to come in and play his role. I think he's going to be a good screener who is going to be able to be a vertical threat, a guy who can pick and pop. And something I wanted to say before too, Corey, when you were talking is that yeah, I do think they should use him more in pick and roll action, but also like they do give him some decent like pick and pop action as well, and he's been able to hit some. And maybe they need to do a little bit more pick and roll with him. But yeah, just you're drafting a guy like this to raise the level. You're a playoff team. Maybe I don't know. You ended up in the late lottery or teens or 20s, and you see it, and Fleming's on the board, and you're like, I'm going to add this guy to support my stars, accentuate their strengths, cover their weaknesses. He's like, he's filling in some of the gaps in your
Mhm.
roster is why you grab a guy like Rasheer Fleming. And so that's kind of how I was seeing him. And so with the creation stuff too, once again, and the finishing, it's like, I'm not expecting the world from him. But at the same time, if he could just like something I saw in his stats we talked about before, like 3-point shooting has increased, free throw shooting's kind of stayed stable, but like even his field goal percentage has gone up. Year
Mhm.
one, he was at 42%, then 52%, and this year over 55%. And so he's trending in all the right directions. And I think his finishing is a part of it. Something that I did want to say with him is that like I don't think he's the best vertical athlete, but for what he lacks in terms of vertical pop, sorry, not to say that he's not vertical athlete, but he's athletic, but he's not like flying through the air. I felt, but I felt like a lot of it was totally fine because of how long his arms are. And so that definitely helps him out, and also the fact that he's really, really strong for the college game. And
Yeah.
so I thought the physicality and the length that he has is more than enough for him to be a rock solid finisher on the college level. And I think he'll be fine in the NBA level as well.
Yeah. I mean, he's 67% overall end in the half court. So, obviously when he gets the ball down low, like he's efficient. And as a play finisher, as a guy who is either cutting or standing in a dunker spot or screening and rolling, like he's going to be somebody who's finishing efficiently. Is he Amin Thompson, Asar Thompson level of balance? Like, probably not, but he is he's probably got a better like frame
Yeah.
physically, and those two guys are super strong too, right? And like you said, like his length is ridiculous. So I think that the length, and even like talking about more of his touch finishing, and again, I don't think he has like super great touch. And when he gets the ball like down low, not to say you're like giving him the ball on the block by any means, but like obviously he's going to get it there sometimes, on drop offs, whatever. He can't dunk everything, right? Like he does have that like turnovers, left shoulder, righty, like hook shot, and he gets like
Mhm.
really good elevation. The ball he releases really high. It's really hard to block, and like the touch is fine. Like it's good. Obviously like 67% in the half court. Like he's an efficient guy. You're not giving him the ball down low, and part of that is just because like he's not going to be able to make you pay as a passer. If you were to spam that move, although I do think he's gotten better there. But he's also a really good offensive rebounder. And this year, I think he's like playing even more around the perimeter. So like the rate is down a little bit from his first 2 years. But if you see him like when he is down low and like the ball comes off the glass, like he gives multiple efforts. He's got that length to kind of tip the ball around back to himself and get his hands on it. He's got a quick first jump off the floor. So yeah, he's a guy who like I love his motor in that regard. And yeah, the offense is simplistic, and we'll kind of talk about, we can move into the playmaking now as to why it's a little more simplistic, right? Because as a playmaker, I would categorize him more as a ball mover than like even a connective passer. Um, if you look through like most of his assists, it's like passes that are one pass away. Um, but he definitely has gotten better this year than he has in years past. And like he has shown like much more intriguing flashes in coming out of the short roll, being able to see the weak side. When he does have the ball in the post, I think sometimes he can make that skip because he is tall and long, and now he's growing accustomed to the college game and feeling more comfortable there, and having a bigger part in the offense responsibility. But I think with him, we always talk about how we want guys to be like 0.5 guys, where it just takes a half a second to be able to make that decision, whether you're going to like dribble, pass, shoot. I feel like he's like a 0.75 processor. Like it's just like a little slow. I want it to be like just a little quicker for him to like move off the ball, because there are times like even like not even talking about him as a passer, like to create an assist. I think like I want the ball to like swing his way, and like if he doesn't have a shot, to like quickly keep the ball moving like without having to think, like understanding that the closeout's going to come. So just like make that next pass and then flow right into like a screen out of that. So like now he's not only like a stationary spot up guy, but he's using that gravity as a spacer to then get the ball flowing to the next option, roll to the rim, and then he can either finish or if he can make that short roll pass consistently off of those actions where the defense is already a little tilted, like that's where I think he kind of needs to get to really reach like whatever we perceive his ceiling is. Because I don't think he needs to hit his ceiling to be a very good NBA player. But I do think that the processing has to improve even with that for him to like be on the trajectory and in the space for him to become the player that I think his ceiling kind of says that he could be in my mind.
Yeah, Corey, just listening to you talk right now, you kind of sounded like I mean, you are a high school basketball coach, but that I felt like that's what I was hearing.
Tough loss in the playoffs. I'm not gonna lie.
Okay.
Not gonna lie. 3-point game. Couple of really bad, debatable. We'll say debatable.
Okay.
3-point fouls back to back in the last minute of the game. So yeah, but that's another story. It's another story.
But I feel like you're kind of still in coaching mode. Like it sounded like you're working with one of your kids, and you're like, "Hey, man, like I love what I'm seeing. You got that your head in the right space, but we can fine tune this." Because Corey, I think everything that you're saying, I really agree with what Mr. Ray is saying in the comments right now. Like I think the important foundation of this conversation is the fact that he is an unselfish player. Like he actually is willing to not just play his role, going back to what we were talking about before, but he's also willing to, flow within his role. He moves the ball well. He cares about moving the ball. He's not this black hole that you throw the ball to and you're expecting to never see the ball again. You know what I'm saying? Like I think that's an important distinction with him that we need to focus on. Where you're right, Corey. Maybe he's not at that 0.5 or at the elite 0.25 that we see with some guys, but maybe he is a 0.75 right now, or maybe worse, a 0.8, 0.9. I don't know. But the fact that he's still willing to pass, that he is an unselfish player, that he cares about playing team basketball, I think those are really important things that we need to note with him. And that's why I just want to say, like, I love what you're saying, because that is that next step for him. And I think NBA coaches will see that. And the most exciting part, though, is that the foundation is good. And NBA coaches are going to be like, good. Hey, Rasheer, we love that you're unselfish, that you like passing the ball, but we want to speed things up a little bit here. So let's get into the film room. Let's watch film. Let's work on some of these reads that you're making. How can we speed this up? Right? How can we have you anticipate how the defense is going to move and shift, and how you can take advantage of, you know what I'm saying? So like, I'm right there with you, Corey. I think it's there in him. He's going to be an unselfish player, but with more reps, with more time, and with NBA level coaching, I can definitely see him eventually getting to that 0.5 area of passing and connectivity.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So all in all, I think there's a lot of interesting tools to work with offensively, and then I think now we can kind of talk about his defense. I think his defense is really fun. 5.2 block percentage, 2.8 steal percentage, 24.9 defensive rebound percentage. He just rebounds the bejesus out of the ball. Like he finds a body, he boxes, and then he goes after it, which I love. But I think you look at the tools and you look at the strength and you look at the way that he's able to move laterally, and you look at a guy and you go, okay, this is really interesting and kind of like, the perfect, piece to add to a defense that can kind of break the board and move all over the place. So, what are your first impressions, about his defense this season?
I actually think he's going to be like a nightmare defensively in the best way possible. Maybe I should have framed that better. I agree with you, Corey. Like, I think I wasn't trying to argue. No, Corey, I think he's going to be a problem defensively for other teams. That's twice now where I was really ambiguous about what I was saying. I think with the size, the length, the physique, the muscle. If you look, I mean, Corey, you've seen him live. He probably looks like a Greek god.
Yeah, he does.
Just
He does.
just a really
Yeah.
powerful human being who, Corey, like you mentioned before too, has good footwork. Maybe not elite footwork, right? But he can move. He can go. He can move laterally. He can stay in front of guys. The thing that's been really fun with him is like even when he's out on the perimeter, like do not think that you're gonna just mosey on right by him. It's not a thing with Rasheer. Like either he's going to be able to keep up with you laterally, or he's so strong and long that even if you do kind of have like a half step on him, like you should not be comfortable and thinking that you're going to have some easy lane to the rim. Like that's just not the case with Rasheer Fleming. He is a big dude, a strong dude. He's really, really long. And I like his instincts too, Corey. Like I feel like, and you mentioned the board stuff too, but even like, if you look at the blocks and steals, I was gonna say blocks and stocks. But yeah, like he's got a lot of good instincts. I think for me, and I do want to note this, I went back and I watched the LaSalle game, right? Because that was a game that he fouled out of. And I watched every foul. And I was like, you know what? I felt like three of them were kind of a bit of a coin toss. I think the ref was a little bit harsh on a couple of those calls, and I think it really impacted his game. Obviously, I think he played like 11 minutes the whole game because I think he had two fouls within like the first like 3 minutes of the game, maybe even less, and I think that really messed with him the rest of the night. But to be totally fair to the ref as well, as much as I like him defensively and I love the skills and the tools and all that stuff, there is still a bit of a refinement with him that still needs to come. There are moments defensively where I think he puts himself at risk, where maybe he can overcommit a little bit, or maybe he's like a little bit too aggressive or physical defensively. But ultimately for me, Corey, like that doesn't bother me too much because I'd rather have a defender that's like too aggressive than not aggressive at all. And especially if he's going to be like a 6'9" long freak like Rasheer Fleming, where if I'm looking NBA outlook, like he could potentially be like a backup five for me, or maybe he's a starter and he's playing the four, and he offers a ton of versatility, being able to defend in space and also protect the rim and do stuff on the help side. So I'm okay with some of the fouls, and like I really wanted to make sure to watch that game and realize that like I think maybe three of the fouls were kind of like toss ups, and maybe in a different game they don't get called, and he's got like two fouls the whole night. So, but still, I think there is a refinement that will come that will make him an even better defender than what he is right now. I think you're muted.
Yeah, and if sorry about that. And if you look at his per 40, 3.5 fouls per 40. So it's not like, he's somebody who is consistently just like hacking away or anything like that. This I think he's obviously like he jump to the next level and everything's faster. And even like, he's not playing in the SEC, right? So like he's not necessarily going up against the best athletes every night. So maybe, that changes as he does move up, in levels. He did have 5 fouls against Texas Tech, right? Like one of the better teams that he's played. So, maybe there is something there to kind of like look towards for when he is playing better athletes. But, against Texas, he had 1 foul. That was a game I went to. He had 20 boards, 2 blocks, 3 steals in that one. But I agree with you. I think he's going to be a nightmare defensively for teams. Like once he gets comfortable, I think that like he's got all the tools that you want. I think he's like super scheme versatile. Like if you want him to guard out in the perimeter, like he can switch on to guards and he can guard wings, and he's like long enough and like he can move well enough laterally that like if you put him on a quicker guard, he can almost like in like a shorter guard, he can almost like engulf them with his size. And then like he's strong enough to body up and bang with the wings. And then like he can play like as a small ball center. And if you want him to be like your weak side rim protector, like he can do that. Or if you want him to like play in a drop, he can do that too. Like I don't think he's perfect playing the cat and mouse game, like when he is playing more in a drop, where he's got a guard too, like and kind of decide, how long he's going to stay with the guard before he gets back to the big. Like that's again some of that processing stuff. And when he has to do that against real NBA defenders, obviously that offensive like stars, which you find every night on the perimeter in the NBA, like there's that could be a problem. But like I don't think he's terrible at it either for a guy who's more of like a forward. But he's got great recovery tools. Like I think he's got pretty good start stop. Like he can play at the level and recover. He can hedge hard and get back. Like his length just allows him to do a ton. And then he's got like quick hands too. So and he plays hard. Like he makes multiple efforts on the board. He makes multiple efforts. So I think he's just a super fun like defensive prospect that I think if you get him with the right coach and the right system, like I think he's gonna be a defender anywhere, but like I think you get him with the right ecosystem and it's like all of a sudden he becomes just like a scary kind of prospect, similar to like I think people had some questions about Tari Eason coming out and whether he was gambling too much or this and that, and it's like he's on that tough Houston Rockets team. And like, he's a nightmare, like you said. And like, I think Rasheer Fleming in with the right ecosystem around him is just like, I don't know, he's going to be able to allow you to do a bunch of really cool things defensively that I think should excite any team that kind of, takes that chance on him.
Yeah, Corey. I mean, for me, selfishly, like as a Knick fan, I'm watching Rasheer Fleming, and I'm like, Tibbs would love this guy. Like, yeah, he's not a 7-footer, but at a guy who's 6'9", with the way that he attacks the boards and with his length and the toughness, I feel like Tibbs would want to bring a guy like this in and just put him in the lab and teach him all the stuff that he teaches to bigs, and he can be everything that could be everything that he wanted Jericho Sims to be, and it just never worked out, right? So
I was even think like Precious.
Yeah, even better. Yeah, and Precious is only back on a 1-year deal, I believe. So maybe cheaper replacement, who knows? But yeah,
like
no, Corey,
like from as far as like archetype goes, right? He has like, and I think he's more forwardy than Precious is, but like, I think he has like that's a kind of like forward center that I like you said, like Tibbs I think would do really well with, and then he also has some of like the OD body type as well, right?
Yeah. No, 100% Corey. And I mean, man, if he can put some things together, if you were ever to get to OG's level, then yeah, he'd be making a lot of money for himself. But yeah, like maybe some hybrid of the two. I think that's interesting too, like some sort of hybrid of OG and Precious, right? I think that evens out to a pretty good NBA player. So yeah, I'm with you.
All right, so let's talk about our prospect chemistry. If you were buying stock in Rasheer Fleming, who may you have bought stock in?
I honestly, I can't really think of one, Corey. I think you're gonna have to go on this one because I had trouble with this one, and I usually try to find something, but this one was harder for me.
Okay, yeah, no, I have a few. I mean, I mentioned Tari Eason. Like, I think he's got a little bit of that to his game. He's like what I think I want Patrick Williams to be. I think Patrick Williams is a more fluid handle, but like if Patrick Williams had a motor or was maybe a pulse, even I think that like he would look really good in that role. And then I think if you were looking at like tippy top tier outcome potentially, I think maybe ultimate, like he reaches his ceiling. The self-creation comes along, like maybe a guy like Pascal Siakam would be like the blueprint if you were a believer in his potential.
Okay. Wow. I don't hate that because if we got, I mean, people might hear that and be like, "Whoa, it's crazy," but
and I don't think I'm just saying like this is his, like he exceeded expectations.
Yeah. No, but also like go back and watch Pascal Siakam in college. Like he was
I did.
not who he is now. You know? No,
I
I was
did.
talking to our listeners, but but I hear that, Corey. I think it makes
Yeah.
sense.
Pascal was he was much more comfortable off the bounce. But if you look at the way he was getting those shots, they don't look like what they look like today.
Yes.
Where he's what how was he, a 10-year NBA vet or something at this point? He has to be, because some of the footage that I watched of Pascal Siakam looked like it was shot in 1991, like to where I was like, where did these people get this camera? He's not that old. But again, like I think that's like a tippy top tier outcome that I would not bet on. But maybe if you're thinking lottery for somebody like him, and I know
Mm,
that there are people who work with teams that do feel that he is a lottery talent. Um, I think maybe that's the type of outcome that you hope. And obviously, you're not looking for a 1-to-1 comparison, but if he has like the kind of floor where he's going to be like an efficient play finisher and kind of defensive Swiss Army knife, then maybe he does all the stuff that allows him to develop his game, and maybe he has like a crazy work ethic and he just keeps getting better, as he has the last 3 years and improving, and he lands on something like that. Like ultimately he's going to be his own player, but who knows, right? Like that sometimes we see these outlier kind of developments. And again, it's hard. He hasn't shown anything off the bounce this year, so it's hard to imagine those outcomes. Mr. Ray says Rocco, Robert Covington, which could be another fun one. So, but either way, I think he says James Johnson too. So, like, James Johnson's been in the league forever, and I don't think it's because he knows karate. You know what I mean? Like, even James Johnson has like a size, physicality, and skill set that has allowed him to hang on forever. So, like, if that's kind of where you think his floor could be, like, this is a guy I think that you do take in lottery.
I agree, Corey. I definitely agree. I think for me, I think the last time I did my board, I don't have it in front of me, but I think he was like just out of the lottery for me. But ultimately, why not? Who cares? Like, I think once we get past like the top tier prospects in this draft, I feel like you could definitely take a guy like Rasheer Fleming at 13. Right? Like, let's imagine
Totally.
that pick is like the Philadelphia 76ers. They're like, I want to add a guy like Rasheer Fleming. Why not? Like 100% could see that, especially if you're trying to take this as like, okay, I like the floor right now, and his ceiling can be X, Y, and Z. Who knows, right? So that's the hard part always of projecting these guys, because we're not always super clear on where their floors and ceilings are. But with a guy like Rasheer, like his floor is extremely high, and you can see how even if he like doesn't develop that much more from what he is right now, it's still a very valuable asset for an NBA team. So we shall see.
Yeah, I do want to make clear that you mentioned the 76ers at the 13th pick, but they're actually at the 6th pick right now. I believe their pick too, if it doesn't land in the top 6, actually goes to OKC. So the Sixers, if we're talking about them right now, they have 6th pick. Just want to make that clear. All right. Sell me this pen, Albert.
Mm.
On one Rasheer Fleming.
Cool. If you're interested in rounding out your roster, let's say you are a fringe playoff team or play-in team, and you've got like a star player, maybe even two, and you're thinking like, man, I just want to add in a guy who is going to make my roster more complete, my starting lineup potentially more complete, but just I want to put a guy with my stars who's just going to make their lives easier. You should be targeting a guy like Rasheer Fleming. He's 6'9". He's shooting the ball really well this season. The shooting's going in the right direction. A guy who's going to be an absolute terror defensively. He's already good defensively. Can't even imagine what he's going to look like in a couple of years with more reps in NBA coaching. And a guy who offensively is growing. Right, he's shown a ton of growth, and I think as of right now, this present moment, he's more of a play finisher. But there's potential for more, and we don't know what that looks like exactly. But I think his floor is that he's a guy that you can bring in, that is going to compete every single night, will be a beast on the boards, is going to be an outside shooting threat. And is just going to fit in. He's a guy that knows what his role is, has no problem playing his role, and has no desire to be, to steal the show. So if you're a team that has like a 1A and a 2, and these guys that are leading your team as the stars, bringing in a guy like Rasheer Fleming would be a great choice because he's going to bring a ton of versatility on both ends of the floor.
I am buying Rasheer Fleming stock for sure.